I'm sure many of you have watched Avatar the Last Airbender and The Legend of Korra, or at least Avatar. It's a classic show from the golden era of Nickelodeon, before SpongeBob was overdone and stripped of all soul, back when the likes of Catdog, Invader Zim, and Fairly OddParents were still airing. All of this off the heels of the end of Hey Arnold and Rugrats. Avatar took its place in the gallery of greats, being one of, if not the, first young adult cartoon that mixed both comedy and fun with drama and consequences. It was fairly revolutionary for Nickelodeon, and was very likely the spark that ignited Nicktoon's need for Dragon Ball Z, and Disney XD's need for Naruto, Pokemon, Bakugan, Yokai Watch, Yu-Gi-Oh!, and, well, I guess you get the point. While anime was still popular in the West, likely being what inspired Dante DiMartino and Bryan Konietzko to make their own Americanime, but it also might be what caused the various kids' cartoon networks to begin thinking that anime might have been workable for younger audiences. Not all anime stood the test of time, with only the likes of Pokemon and other softer anime being accepted into the mainstream, and the other more mature greats being relegated to Adult Swim. Avatar was the show that found the balance between cool, flashy, and dramatic, while still balancing with kid-friendly. And because of that, the series has been expanded into movies, Netflix adaptations, books, comics, and even spawned its own studio. And as we stand here at the precipice of at least one new show, I can't help but look back on the series that changed my life and think how hyped I am for everything to come. So, having pooled together as much Avatar and Korra goodness I possibly could, I've decided that I would like to attempt to rank all of the bending elements to answer once and for all which element is the best. I hope you'll all join me as I begin, but first, let me just say, welcome to the Amagi. Before we begin, only 25% of our viewers are subscribed, so if you're a fan of the video, please like and double check if you are subscribed. And with that out of the way, let's get into the video. Number 4, airbending. For the namesake of the original series itself, you would have to think that this would rank very highly, and yet it doesn't. For everything that it's worth, airbending isn't really that impressive of an element. Like, I won't lie, it is a great element, and seeing it finally return after the harmonic convergence in The Legend of Korra blew my mind. And despite the fact that Aang is so iconic, I can't lie when I say that Zahir is perhaps my favorite airbender of all time. Aang is my favorite Avatar of all time, but Zahir might be my favorite airbender. Whether that's a controversial opinion or not, I don't know, but his viewpoints, motivations, and reason for hunting Korra were nothing short of magnificent, narratively speaking. It was nothing personal to him. He was a zealot that believed that he could keep balance better than the Avatar, believing that the Avatar had become too big and lost the point of what they were doing. He believed that the whole point of order was disorder, that the true, natural way was nihilism, as government and all these other things were an invention of man. The natural world had only one set of laws to him, the law of the jungle. And so he set about trying to permanently end the Avatar just to ensure that they couldn't get in the way and restore the false balance he perceived. And I'll be darned if he didn't almost pull it off. Korra barely escaped that alive. Zahir proved what good coordination with a small team could do, and showed that even the pacifistic ways of the airbenders could be turned around and sharpened into a deadly weapon. But all the same, airbending is itself a pacifistic art, designed to be used for basic self-defense. It's all it was honed for, that and attaining enlightenment, which is why all of its users are monks in some way, shape, or form. While the likes of air scooters and being able to blow your opponents away make this one of the safer and easier options, especially when there's no lack of elemental material for you to bend. If you can breathe, you can bend. That makes it versatile, but when it comes to strength and potency, it's perhaps the most underpowered. And I believe that DiMartino and Konietzko understood that, which is why he let Aang start with it. After all, his growth was controlled by narrative and the concept of opposites, not by power. But anyway, with airbending, you get the likes of air scooter, air blasts, and great agility, most of which Aang used in his highly defense-based fighting style. But at its rawest, airbending can even be used to rip the air out of your lungs and asphyxiate you, much like Zahir did to the Earth Queen during his campaign. The techniques that you get from this are mostly utility, like the ability to fly, which is the highest form of airbending that so few in the thousands of years since OWN have achieved. Ironically, Zahir was the first to do this in a while, showing that he was leaps and bounds ahead of even the greatest airbending masters that taught Aang. I do believe Aang knew how to do it though. After all, he did have a tendency to float when in his avatar state, so I guess saying Zahir was the first isn't technically true, but he's the first one that didn't rely upon previous users to do so, gaining the ability by himself. But besides that and astral projection, which one could argue isn't really an airbending thing, as we know that at least Iroh, who is a firebender, could do it when he traveled to the spirit world to live. And so, because of its basic nature, I'd say that airbending is a bit lacking compared to the others. As such, I'm calling it at number 4. Sorry if you love it, I do too. It's just objectively weaker than the other bending arts. Number 3, firebending. You'd think for a technique that made the bad guys so unstoppable in the original show and signified the very concept of war and destruction that it would be higher than this, but sadly, it's not true. You see, firebending suffers from similar issues as airbending. While it is definitely more aggressive, one of the most aggressive elements on the list, its utility suffers for it, as all it really seems to do is destroy and hurt, at least if you look at it from Aang's earlier perspective. By the end of the series, we learn through Zuko, Iroh, and the dragons that fire is not the embodiment of death and destruction, but passion. It's the heat of the sun, it's the warmth of a hug, and it's that glowing ember that keeps you alive in the cold. It's a powerful element in that it can be just as destructive as it can be helpful. Iroh was the beginning of this philosophical breakdown of firebending, as he was the one to begin with explaining to Zuko, through lightning redirection, how to move chi about his body in the same way waterbenders do. This actually offers a really big question of how many techniques waterbending and firebending can share. Can waterbenders redirect lightning too? Can firebenders use their heat to heal? Iroh's philosophy was one of no borders and open horizons. By taking in information from everywhere and applying it to your everyday, you could discover new techniques and applications for your abilities, which gives firebending so much promise as a bending element. Not to mention, it's the most naturally colorful element of them all. I mean, if anyone ever watched Aang and Zuko doing their dance alongside the dragons, you'll know what I mean. Zuko so should have used those colors against Azula. But all the same, a lot of the techniques I speak of here are hypothetical. The only things firebending has is fire, lightning, and combustion. Thanks to what we know from Avatar and Korra, some firebenders can use combustion bending by focusing their energy to their forehead, generally with an eye tattoo marking there. This technique is nothing but pure destruction, and makes me think it was developed when a number of firebenders who, like Zuko, had no luck with lightning bending, decided to weaponize their failure into something easily as destructive, and perhaps more so, than lightning. And while it doesn't take as many intricate moves to use as lightning does, it does have its downsides. It can generally only be concentrated from one point on the body, and if ever one closes that chakra point through, I don't know, a boomerang or, a frickin' helmet, you're dead as crap. So yeah, in most cases, the most dangerous thing to a combustion bender tends to be themselves. Of the two we've seen on screen, they both died due to the same misfiring issue. So if you know how to beat a combustion bender, you can kinda just one-tap them. Even worse when you realize that it takes a little time to begin the process before release, and after building it up, you can't stop it. Zahir's girlfriend learned that the hard way when she blew her own brains out with her technique. And worse still, she knew it was coming. That was one of the most tragic things in that entire season, besides Cripple Korra. But hey, at least he got to learn how to fly. And since I don't think lightning bending, one of the first sub-bending types, shouldn't be a mere footnote on the sole of Zuko's pointy shoes, I need to give it due respect. Called the cold-blooded fire, it's very precise and very dangerous. One of the coolest techniques to exist since, well, ever. It takes an intricate dance and set of motions to generate. It's best explained by Uncle Awesome himself. There is energy all around us. The energy is both yin and yang, positive energy and negative energy. Only a select few firebenders can separate these energies. This creates an imbalance. The energy wants to restore balance, and in a moment, the positive and negative energy come crashing back together. You provide release and guidance, creating lightning. After hearing this, it almost sounds like firebending is in some way even more connected to energy bending than any other element. It not only allows one to manipulate the energy inside of themselves, but around them as well, which is why there's a sort of dance or motions required to use it. The user is separating the energies around them. Honestly, Iroh's explanation and the way it's shown through the movements echo how thunderstorms work, how friction in the air causes negative and positive charges to separate and fire off a bolt of electricity with a thunderous sound. It's very similar to that, except it makes you like Emperor Palpatine. Funnily enough, I guess this makes Zuko and Iroh like Yoda. A very highly advanced technique, it is considered the crown jewel in firebending excellence, and use of it proves that you are an elite bender. That's why Azula using it and Zuko's inability to was such a big deal. A fight between those two had been brewing for a while, and the friction between them was as symbolic as the friction that creates lightning bolts. Azula being able to use lightning while Zuko couldn't was what would lead up to the last Agni Kai. Narratively speaking, it has to be one of, if not the coolest technique of them all, but sadly, it's not enough to earn it the #1 spot. But please, take a participation trophy and all of my love, because you're the bestest element of all in my heart. Number 2, earthbending. Surely, if you follow the logic, you now know what has to be at #1, but please don't click off. There's a lot of lore and reasoning as to why this is so stick around. Now, let's talk about earthbending. Earthbending is one of the more powerful elements in all of Avatar. There's a reason why the only person who really was ever a threat to the same extent as Ozai had to be Kuvira. The element of earth is just so dang overpowered. Being the most tangible of all elements, it makes sense that it's probably the hardest to bend, and requires an iron will and stubbornness that most airmads don't possess, which explains why Aang had such a hard time learning it. Not only is it the exact opposite of air, but in a way, Toph was the exact opposite of Aang, being more, for a lack of a better word, grounded, while Aang always had his head in the clouds. Toph's stubbornness was what made her a great bender, perhaps being the only one to ever surpass the Mad King himself, Bumi. That fellow is still one of, if not actually, my favorite characters in the series. He was closer to Aang's ideals, being quite loose and open-minded, being the one to teach Aang that there's more than just two types of Jing. Instead of aggressive positive Jing, which focuses on aggressiveness such as that of the firebenders, and instead of the negative Jing, which personified peacefulness and avoidance of conflict that the airbenders embodied, the two Jings finding balance in waterbenders. Bumi taught Aang of neutral Jing, which is to do nothing. If you want to think of the Jings, positive and negative would be like the fight or flight response, with neutral Jing often being associated with freezing, though that's a bit harsh as freezing happens when you can't decide which Jing to follow. That ironically matches the waterbenders a bit more, as they can literally freeze water and can't seem to decide if they want to take the fight to the Fire Nation or hole up in their cities and wait for their destruction, Air Nomad style. But I identify neutral Jing as being a more controlled waiting or readiness strategy, in that you're not ruled by your emotions, but bending your emotions to your own will, letting wisdom make the play as opposed to panic. That seemed more like how earthbenders work, as they often wait for you to draw closer to them instead of chasing you down or running away. They stand firm and resolute, like the element they bend. Even when the ground falters, an earthbender will never be moved, and that makes them one of the most dangerous types of bender in the world. Their combat philosophy is basically the concept of the man's man, in that they don't seek a fight, but they're certainly not going to run for it, and will wait for you to draw close and seal your own fate before popping you off and packaging you like 20 cigarettes ready for Walmart. This is reflected in their lack of movement in battle. They're not super acrobatic. They're very rigid, sometimes to their own detriment. That's just the kind of resolve that's required to bend the most stubborn element. After this, Bumi identifies at least 82 other types of Jing, but we're not crazy enough to comprehend this wisdom, so we will move right along. Besides standard earthbending, which when done correctly also allows you to sense movement through seismic sense like a mole, it also gives you the ability to bend the likes of metal. It was believed that metal bending was impossible due to how apparently the metal's too pure and doesn't contain enough rocks. And as such, it can't be bent, making it the perfect way to capture an airbender. But you see, that's stupid, so Toph doesn't abide by that rule. Even metal has impurities in it and thus can be bent. This has become useful in many aspects, such as Toph creating fully fledged armor for herself in the heat of battle, ripping doors off their hinges and escaping from cages and boxes alike. Later on, the technique is taught to other benders and her own family. When Toph started the police force in Republic City, she began to teach this to others, who would go on to use metal wire to swing around the city like Spider-Man. It allowed for the easier restraining of enemy benders and non-benders alike. But the question in my mind is why this stops at metal. You know, there are other things with the likes of dirt in them. One of these would be the human body. Turns out we're made of a lot of carbon, and that includes our bones. Can you imagine bone bending? That's such a tough thing to learn. But it probably wouldn't have been done since it was so... Well, wait, I just remembered another bending type that does basically the same as bone bending, so this has no reason not to exist. But I guess it goes into the hypothetical pile with all the other abilities we can imagine for firebending, so let's move on. Earthbending also has lava bending, which is like the poor man's firebending, but a lot more tangible. Lava bending was apparently discovered by Avatar Zito in the year, probably lots of time before Yang Chen BG. It was later used by the likes of Roku in an attempt to save his home from the eruption that he should have expected while living on a volcano. Not much is known about the discovery of this bending type, except almost all of its users are in some way related to firebending. Zito and Roku were both Fire Nation avatars, and one of the modern users, Bolin, is himself the brother of a firebender, likely meaning either his father or mother was a firebender, with his other being an earthbender. So that should make it less of a sub-bending type and more of a hybrid bending type. But nah, they call it a subtype, and I guess I will too. Anyway, yeah, lava bending. Woo! And now for the moment you've all been waiting for. Our number one slot. Number 1. Waterbending. Often they say something or someone is a jack of all trades, master of none. And generally this is true, unless you're talking about waterbending. Then it's about as unfair as Kurama being stronger than all other 8-tailed beasts put together. That's how broken waterbending is. Let's just talk about what it can do. Waterbending can do a bit of everything in some respects. The basic techniques of waterbending allow the user to push and pull water, manipulate its shape, and control it in all manners of ways. Despite being a lot less tangible than the likes of Earth, it's still more tangible than air and fire, capable of being used as a whip, catching people in a bubble, and even creating a big freaking kaiju body like Aang did at its pinnacle. But that's not all this can do. This element is the pinnacle of what Bruce Lee meant when he said, "Be like water." The waterbenders took that to heart and ran with it, because they came up with the most humanitarian and aggressive ways to use water imaginable, emphasizing their inability to choose between positive and negative Jing. They just go where the waves push them, and sometimes that's out to open waters, and sometimes that's against sharp and pointy rocks. But either way, they survive. Wherever you drop a waterbender, they survive. Drop them in the Arctic, and not only do they survive, but they learn how to make ice out of water, somewhat flowing into the concept of a subtype naturally. Yes, they have ice bending, a bending subtype that allows them to take their liquid attacks and make them solid. And while it's generally nothing compared to the hardness of Earth, it's definitely gonna sting when it comes at you like 1,000 arrowheads at near sonic speeds. But that's not the only place they survive. Take them out of the cold and drop them in, say, the Earth Nation? They go down to the bayou and become the Froggy Swamp Tribe, that now not only utilizes the power of water, but also the power of banjos and loincloths. And if that's not enough for you, they also gain the ability to control plants due to the water inside of them. Yes, you heard me, they're encroaching into earthbending territory just how earthbenders encroach into firebending territory. Waterbenders can even pull water out of the air during a day with a high dew point, and if the dew point isn't that high, they can just draw upon their own sweat for more water. And hey, if that's not creepy enough, guess what else they can bend? If you said blood, ding ding ding, you win a prize. If you want to claim it, then all you have to do is delete your System 32. Actually, don't do that, I'm just making a bad joke. Do not delete System 32 or your device is bricked. But anyway, yeah, blood is actually mostly water. That's what the plasma is. It actually surprises a lot of people to know this, but iron isn't actually a silver color. If you liquefy iron, it takes on a red color. That's why people with higher iron levels in their blood get progressively darker and darker colors of blood. Some people almost have black blood due to having so much iron. But without any iron in your body, your blood would actually be clear, like water, of which it's mostly comprised. So that means there's a lot to grab onto with bloodbending. Bloodbenders can grab onto other people and use them as puppets, since the human body contains anywhere between 50 to 75% water. That means a waterbender can control 50% of your body. Isn't that scary? But it gets even worse, because through the use of these sorts of techniques, a waterbender can actually take your bending away. Seriously. Amon, the main villain of Korra's first season, was a powerful waterbender from a clan of waterbenders who could bloodbend without the aid of the full moon. With this power, they could take people's bending abilities away in a style very similar to energy bending. So yes, waterbending even crosses into energy bending territory. It can take away bending powers, so even hypothetically speaking, it's not entirely implausible that it could give bending too. Well, I guess that depends upon the nitty-gritty of energy bending and if it merely awakens something or if it outright gives it to you. I forget. Give me a second while I check the Avatar wiki. I don't know, they didn't mention it. But it does say that energy bending can bring back the powers lost from blood bending, which is true, because Aang's ghost brought Korra's bending back after she lost it, so it is at least in some manner the same. Now, can you see why I think this stuff is so busted? But would you believe me if I said it had even more applications? Yes, through waterbending and energy manipulation, waterbenders can force the human body to heal in different ways, allowing third-degree burns to fade almost instantly. In the Northern Water Tribe, this is the only bending type that is taught to women, though apparently if they're good enough to learn it some other way, that's fine. But nah, women stay at home and make sandwiches, according to those Northern Water Tribe bastards. That was until Katara made a very special sandwich made out of knuckles and fed it to Paku, earning respect and convincing the Water Tribe that while tradition is great, they shouldn't let it hold them back. Women can fight just as much as a man can heal. And it's that flexibility that is what kept the Water Tribe going for so long. And so, not only did water bending bring us blood bending, swamp bending, ice bending, and energy bending subtype, and healing, but also women's suffrage and equal rights. It's the everyman's element. And that extends into the spirit world too, because guess what? This element has another subtype. Spirit bending, or maybe spirit cleansing. This element can and has been used to heal or appease angry spirits and even cleanse evil from them. In fact, Vaatu, basically the anti-Avatar spirit, was pretty much eradicated for a while just because Korra cleansed all the evil from it, which sadly was all Vaatu was made of. To give you an idea of how powerful waterbenders are against spirits, Avatar Kuruk, after his girlfriend's face got slurped up by Kol the Face Stealer, he woke up, chose violence, and began a spiritual genocide run that would make even Chara blush. Bro killed so many spirits that he died of old age at the ripe age of 33, his body riddled with every pharaoh's curse you can think of. He sent every spirit he came across to the Shadow Realm with waterbending. Waterbenders aren't just a threat to corporeal creatures, but incorporeal ones too. I'm of the mind of thinking that, ignore a fully realized Aang, give us a fully realized Katara, and she would have curb-stomped Ozai so hard, he wouldn't have remembered his own mother's name. She'd have left him without his bending, his dignity, and probably would have given him chronic dry eye and cottonmouth for the rest of his life. And that's why we think waterbending is the strongest, simply because it is. I mean, I could be being somewhat unfair here by including energy bending, which can just give and take away bending types from anyone, but that's not exactly fair, as we know that not only can it take them away, but it can grant them. It can pretty much exchange them even. So if you don't like the element you're using, you can just give yourself another. And if you've got a powerful spirit like Arava on your side, you can even become the next freaking Avatar. And that includes learning to use waterbending. But if we're talking about regular elements that you can actually be born with, then water is the way to go. I'm surprised that Unalaq wasn't the main villain besides Kuvira. Bro literally became the evil Avatar with Vaatu, and he would have beaten Korra too if he hadn't been the one to teach her how to purify dark spirits. Like, man, it's bad how powerful waterbending is. It's the most broken element in the world, and the only thing holding it back from conquering the world is its inability to decide which Jing to choose. The element of water is by far the strongest element, not just because 70% of the earth is made up of it, but because 70% of you is made up of it. And it's really hard to beat that. Now I'm just waiting for the cactus juice bending subtype. Not only beat the snot out of your opponent, but leave him high as a kite. But anyway, what do you think? Do you agree with this list? Or do you have reasons as to why it's wrong? Let us know in the comments below. Be sure to tell us your favorite type, and which you'd choose if you could only have one. Please don't pick energy bending. That's off limits. Now that I said that, everyone's gonna choose it. Be sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell to be notified when our latest videos drop. I bet you don't want to miss that. And while you wait for those videos, be sure to check out these other great videos from our channel. I'll bet you'll love them too. Until next time, peace out.